I'm going to show you how to stitch together some services publishing a mixture of XML and JSON data. This is a good entry-level walkthrough, so if you've never done anything with Orbital before, this is a good place to start. Let's dive in. So this is the code that's powering the services that we're going to integrate today. Now, normally when you reach for a tool like Orbital, it's when you're trying to stitch together multiple services from across your organization. Today, to keep the demo simple, I've just deployed these as a single Spring Boot service. But in practice, you would use Orbital when your services are running in lots of different locations. So we have three services that are providing information about films. The first one is giving us just a list of films. And this is a simple GET request that returns some XML data, providing a list of films. My second endpoint is giving me the cast of each film. So I pass in the ID of the film into the URL, and it gives me back the list of actors who are in it, again, as XML. And my third endpoint is giving me information about the awards that each film has won. So again, this time I'm going to be passing in the ID into the URL, and this one's giving me back a blob of JSON. And what we want to do is stitch together these three different services to create a single endpoint or a single data product that we want to use. So let's get into it. I'm going to start off by creating a Taxi project. Taxi is the language that we use to describe services and data and how everything relates. You're going to want to make sure you have Taxi installed. It's installed through SDKman, so I've already got it installed. And I'm just in an empty directory. So I'll start off by creating a new Taxi project by typing Taxi in it. And I'm in, so give it a project group, which we'll call com.demos, and a project name. This is XML and JSON. And it's created all the files that we need. And so to get started, we'll dive straight into VS Code. So I'll open a VS Code instance here. Here we go. And it's going to, it will install and recommend any plugins that you need. But we've basically got a nice empty Taxi conf file and nothing sitting in our source folder. Before we go much further, I'm going to use Orbital to help me create some of the assets that we need. So I'll just jump back here and type Taxi Orbital. And all that does is starts up a local instance of Orbital for me, pulling the different images and getting everything that I need up and running. So I'll wait for that to start. And now here, running on localhost 9022, is an instance of Orbital. Now this is a specially configured instance for local development. So any changes that I make in VS Code on the left are automatically going to be picked up instantly inside of Orbital on the right. And so this is a nice way when you're building out a project to be able to iterate inside of VS Code, but still get the full developer experience inside of Orbital itself. Later on, when this is deployed, Orbital will be looking at a Git repository rather than my local file system. But for development, this is a really nice experience. So with Orbital, instead of writing integration code, we use schemas to describe our data sources, and Orbital works out how to stitch everything together. Now, often, depending on the services that you're using, they might publish their own types of schemas. If we're using XML services, there might be an XSD. If we're using JSON services, there might be an Open API spec. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to do this without any schemas, without any external schemas. So we're going to write everything in Taxi. But like I say, if you've got existing schemas, you don't need to go through this step. So let's start out by creating a schema to describe our films data. So let's jump into Postman and take a look at the actual data that our service gives us back. We can see our XML data here. It's a pretty standard XML wrapper of a list with a bunch of repeating items, each containing a film. Now, like I said before, if we had an XSD schema that described this data, we wouldn't need to create one in Taxi, but I want to walk through the process of creating one for this demo. So let's copy this XML blob. I'm going to hop into Orbital, and Orbital has this quite nice designer which will help me actually design a Taxi model. So I'm just going to plop in our blob of XML on the left here. Let's make it a bit bigger. So we've got our blob of XML on the left, and we're going to design some taxi on the right, and we'll see it parse out at the bottom. So let's start out with what we've got. So we have a list, a film list, and it's got an attribute called an item, which is a collection of films. So we have a film, and that has a title, which is a film title, which is a type of string. And it's got a year released, which is a year released, which is an integer. And we want to view this as a film list. And so it's showing as null, and that's because I need to tell Orbital that this is XML. And there we go, there's our data that's parsing out down the bottom. So we've got our title and our year released. We're missing our ID, so let's add that in. There we go, so we've got our film ID and our film title and our year released. Now, what I'm doing on the top here, when I'm designing these taxi models, you can see I'm defining both the name of the field, but I'm giving each type a special type. And it's because these types are what we're going to use to share data across services and to connect our services together. So we don't get coupled on the field names, which means they're free to change, but instead we use these types to indicate how things hang together. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to copy that and pop it into my taxi project. So let's bring that up over here. I'll create a new file called films.taxi. I'll just paste that in. Now, I also want to configure the service that is exposing this. So there's let's define that. So there's we'll call it the films service. And it's got an operation called get all films, which returns a film list. It's an HTTP operation. It's running we'll just grab our URL back from Postman. It's running there with a method of get. Okay, and so as I'm saving this, Orbital is updating on the right-hand side. So now that I have exposed that service, I can jump into Orbital's catalog, take a look at a services diagram, just zoom that out a bit. We can see that we've got this REST API that returns a film list, which has a collection of films. We can see how the data all kind of hangs together. Great, so now that we have our list of films, let's do the same thing for our cast. So we'll jump back into Orbital, we'll take a look at into Postman. Let's take a look at the cast data that we're getting back. So we've got our URL here of film. It's got a film ID of 2, and we're asking for the cast. And here's my blob of data. So we'll do the same thing. We'll just define a taxi schema that describes this content. So let's hop back into Orbital, into our designer, paste in our XML here, and we're going to design some taxi that describes this. So we've got a actor list, which has an item, which is an actor, model of actor, which has a ID, and here it's int, and it's got a name, call it actor name, and here it's a string. This is it's XML, and if we take a look now, you happy with that? Yep, that looks about right. We've got our actor ID, our actor name. That looks like it's parsing out correctly. So I'll just copy that, pop back into VS Code where I can paste this in. So I don't need that import again. So I've got my actor list, which is returning a collection of actors. Here's my actor defined. So now we're going to expose the HTTP operation for that as well. So we'll just grab that URL from Postman again. Method is get. So this is an operation that fetch cast for film, and it returns a actor list. Now, the URL here takes in the film ID. So what we need is a way of saying, I want the ID that's coming from my film to be passed into the service. And so let's say that that's not just any old number, it's a film ID. And here I want a film ID, which is of type film ID, and that should be populated from the path. Great. So we've got now our one service that's exposing a list of films and another service that's exposing our actors. If we hop back into Orbital and take a look at our diagram again, we can see now that we've got two services, one which returns a film list. Each film has a collection of films. Each film has an ID, and that ID can be passed back into a film service to return a list of actors. So we can see now that Orbital understands how all of this data hangs together. So let's ask it to bring some back for us. So I'm going to jump into the query editor and start writing a query. So queries for data are written using Taxi's query language. The idea behind Taxi is that we ask for data declaratively without specifying where to get it. And the types that we've been using to describe our data and our data sources provide enough information so we don't have to write any glue code. So I can ask, for example, for a film list. Let's start nice and simple. Look at my raw data. Here's the data that's come back. We can look in the profiler and see that we did a request to the film service to get a film list, and we can see the raw data that has come out from that. So here's the data that I want. It's my list of films. We've got this nasty XML-esque item collection here, and what I really just want is the list of films that are coming out. So let's ask for that just as a list of films. There we go. And so we can restructure the data however we want. So now we're getting a list of films that are coming back. What I really want, though, is my films with my cast. So let's take this collection of films and project it. So I want give me the film ID. Give me the title of film. And also give me the cast, which is a collection of actors. And now if I run it, so now we're getting our data back in exactly the way that we asked for. So I'm getting my collection of actors, and I'm getting a film ID and a title that are coming back. Now I'm defining the model shape here that I want. So if instead of title, I wanted to call this name of film, I can do that. And the data that I get back has name of film. So I'm not coupled to whatever the source system has described this as, because we're using the types to indicate the data that I want. Likewise, maybe instead of having the cast there, I want a separate. I want to nest that, so we're going to have the people involved object, and we'll pop the cast there. Maybe later we'll stick directors. There we go. So I can design the data model that I want. If we have a look in the profiler, we can see that we did this initial request to get our films, and then we've called the film service to fetch the cast for each film to enrich this out. Okay, so the one thing that we have left to do now is to also pull in our list of awards. So let's wire that one in. We'll jump back into Postman for the last time and take a look at our awards data. So here it is. Copy that, hop back into Orbital, go into our designer, just going to paste in my JSON, and then we'll design a taxi model to describe that. So we have a model of award, which has a title, award title, a string, and we have a year one. We'll just double check. So we'll pass that as award. And there we go. So it's correctly parsing out the data that we're looking for. So I'm happy with that. Copy that into our taxi project. model award. We'll add our operation. So we'll call this fetch awards for film. This also takes a film ID in its URL. URL ends in awards, takes its film ID, and this time, instead of giving this kind of wrapper object that we have in XML, this is just directly returning a JSON collection of awards. Save that. Pop back over into Orbital. You can see our service diagram now. Fetch awards for films, takes a film award in and gives us back film ID in and gives it back an award. So let's go back and take a look at our query that we were just running. So I'll just re-grab that query from the history. Here it is. And finally, I want to add in here my list of awards. Now let's run that. And there we go. So we can see that Academy and Dinosaur got the best original score for a comedy in 2020, and that's the data that we're getting back. If we look in our profiler, we can see the requests that are going on to call the awards data as well as our cast. And Orbital's handling the fact that some of this data is in XML, some of it is in JSON. It's correctly populating the URL on the way out. So that's exactly the data that we want. Finally, I want to tidy this up a little bit. So let's maybe drop this out. So here's my awards and my cast now back as an element. So now I have this query, I'm happy with it, I want to save it. So just click save. I'm going to pop this in my XML and JSON project that I created. We'll give it a query of films and awards. And all that's done is in my Taxi project, it's written it into films and awards.taxi. So here's my same query. It's now in my project ready for me to commit. But the one last thing that I want to do is expose this as an HTTP endpoint. So we'll call it films and awards. And so here's my query now exposed as an HTTP operation. And so I can hit this endpoint and get this data back. So we'll jump into Postman. I'll do a new GET request to HTTP localhost 22. Here's my data that's coming back. This is stitching together all of these different services for us. And we haven't had to write any integration code. Really, all we've done is describe the services that we want. Describe the services that we have. Use data types to indicate how our data relates, and then written a query asking for the data back. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks very much.